Hello everyone, back with coverage of round 6 of the Olympiad. Lebanon facing off against Estonia. A very, very strong team again. Once again, littered with GMs and IMs. And yeah, we're facing an uphill battle here. So let's see what Kaloust was able to do against Mr. Kiik Kalle. Or Kalle. I'm not sure, sorry guys. If anyone speaks Estonian in the comments, please fix my pronunciation, I would greatly appreciate it. Alright, so we get this Karakan, which goes into the fantasy variation, a true fantasy. Yeah, here white first of all avoids a lot of theory in the Karo by playing f3, and just protects the e4 pawn, wants to go for an ideal center should black recapture. And yeah, while this move does block in the knight, white argues that protecting the center here is more important. And the fantasy variation, while not often played, is actually very decent. Actually, I think MVL has been the biggest proponent of the fantasy variation in recent years, and yeah, it's completely fine. Here Gio goes for d takes e4, which is an interesting move. e6 is the more commonly played move and probably the better move theoretically. But d takes e4 is completely fine, and Gio has a certain line in mind, which basically arises by force. So after f takes e4, e5, I should give this, I should annotate this as a good move, but okay, it's just theory. The point here is that after takes, you take here, and these double pawns aren't going to last long. You can pick them up easily, and the king being uncastled here means a lot because black has quick queenside castles, which is greatly annoying for white, even though in some of these queenless middle game positions it's not, but in this particular position it turns out to be. So d takes e5 cannot really be played with a good conscience, so here knight f3 is played, just now trying to, basically to just take with the knight. So bishop g4 pins the knight, bishop c4 attacks this f7 square and sets up some nasty tactics with bishop takes f7 check. Knight d7 lending further support to the e5 pawn. Now this check no longer works because against takes you have takes, and against any check here you can just take with the queen and then you're completely fine. So c3 here was played, solidifying the center, bishop d6 developing, and again defending e5 and maybe attacking in the future. h3 kicking the bishop back, and now bishop h5, very good move. Just further defending f7, or defending f7 for the second time. And yeah, you don't need to give up the bishop pair just yet and develop white's queen. Castles here, knight gf6, all very natural. Bishop g5 pinning this knight, and now queen c7 was played. A bit, I mean, it's fine, but maybe, yeah, queen c7 is completely fine. Actually, it's a way to keep the game going, but maybe against his very strong opponent, perhaps Gio could have gone for something more forcing with this h6 line, which basically forces a slightly better endgame for Gio, which occurs after takes here, seemingly winning a pawn. But after bishop c5 check, the king moves, you take here, and now knight takes e4, and here black enjoys the bishop pair, and probably the better structure here with these three pawns versus these sorry, these two pawn islands. So with this one pawn island against these two pawn islands, so yeah, this probably makes some sense for black, especially because Gio is heavily outrated. But okay, queen c7 is a way to continue the game, and that's fine as well. Knight bd2, standard development, and now b5. I don't really like this move because the whole concept just creates a lot of weaknesses, because in the future white is going to go a4, and after a4 is played, which I believe was played in the game, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure a4 was played in the game. So after a4 you have to go a6, and then you have this kind of Meran structure that arises from the semi-Slav, but you don't really have a light squared bishop that's anywhere near the queen side as black. So this kind of formation just seems rather weak. Instead, just h6, kicking the bishop out, maybe trying to go for some sort of line as in the h6 line we saw earlier with this bishop c5 check and trading queens, but not exactly, because probably the queens won't be traded here due to the knight. But yeah, just going for this and improving the position made more sense. Okay, b5, bishop e2, castles, knight h4, trying to annoy this bishop. So if bishop g6, knight takes will be played, winning the bishop pair, which is what happened. And now bishop f3. Here perhaps just a4 was better, because now you're forcing black to play a6, which is really not so desirable, and a4 chips away at the pawn center. Instead bishop f3 was played, which kind of misplaces the bishop and the knight, because now the knight, probably more importantly the knight, because the knight really has no good squares. Knight b3, okay, it makes some sense trying to attack these squares, but they're well covered. So the knight really isn't doing much, and knight f3 of course now can't be played. So rook f e8, very good move by Gio, insinuating some of these ideas. And now king h1, probably a good move, getting out of these nasty diagonal checks, and more important also this diagonal check. Actually, yeah, king h1 is quite a good move in my opinion, because let's see if white plays something random like b3, then black puts another rook in the center, queen c1, another stupid move by white. I'm just showing the plan here. Knight f8, and this is the plan for black. Queen d1, e takes, knight e6, and now for example if bishop e3, now you have the nice tactical shot, knight takes d4. And that's why it's important to move the king to h1, because if the king were on h1, then bishop h2 would not be a check. So this showcases, this silly line showcases why king h1 here is actually a good move. So black's plan is to play all of this stuff, and yeah, this will be less strong after king h1. Bishop e7, dilly-dallying a bit, just knight f8, going with this plan we talked about. That made much more sense, and Gio actually does find knight f8, but much later, and by then it wasn't so good. Actually it was the best move, but like by then it could have been better before, like now. So bishop e7, bishop e3, good move, avoiding any of these nasty shenanigans with knight takes e4 and knight g3 check ideas, uncovering an attack on the bishop. So here, like for example, knight takes e4 and stuff like that. Now it doesn't really work now because you just recapture, but yeah, avoiding that and getting the bishop to defend the center and to a better square. It's not really doing much on g5 anyway. a6, standard move, probably preempting also a4. b3, also a standard move, kind of because white is really lacking in other moves. The knight is just misplaced, and yeah, you have to move some pawns eventually. Rook a d8 in line with the plan, and now perhaps this is coming. Rook c1, lining up with the queen, makes a lot of sense, but perhaps a3 first made more sense, because now there's no longer bishop a3. So after rook c1, perhaps there's bishop a3 to annoy the rook. Now Gio doesn't even go for that and goes bishop d6, which is probably even better than bishop a3. Maybe you could insert bishop a3 then bishop d6, but like rook c2 might be at some point a good move, and actually later we'll see that rook c2 does become a good move. So bishop d6 is nice, queen e2, and now knight f8 in line with our development plan. Queen e2 is just connecting the rooks and stuff like that, maybe attacking b5 a bit. But yeah, knight f8, very good move, in line with the plan to go to e6. Okay, so queen f2, just further defending d4, maybe insinuating some of this stuff, trying to skewer the queen and rook, and maybe going on the queen side as well. And here knight 8 d7, defending against this b6 threat and further defending here. But this move was just like undeveloping. Instead, actually, black could have played knight e6. The point here is that after d takes e5, bishop takes e5, bishop b6 doesn't really work because of rook takes d2. And if takes here, you just take here. And if you take here, you just take here. And black should be much better. So knight e6 was working tactically, and it's a very good positional move, as we talked about, taking here, going here, going here. The knight is doing very well and very good stuff on that square. So knight 8 d7 unfortunately was played, and here his opponent had Gio's opponent had the chance to play b4, really stopping this c5 move and forcing basically black to go for counterplay with a5, which at many points isn't so desirable because sometimes you can just play a3 to close it down and sometimes a4 to open it up when you have the rooks, for example, here, and yeah, it can get quite annoying. Instead he played g4 though, his opponent, going for a kingside attack, which is also rather reasonable. However, b4 was much stronger, and now rook f8, just defending f7, but again, no need to defend because actually the kingside stuff is well taken care of, and after b4 you get some counterplay on the queen side. Takes here, for example, allows takes, knight, bishop b takes d4, and now bishop g3, and if queen g1 you have bishop f4 attacking here and getting this pin going, and you're always defending against bishop b6. So this is quite good for black, and actually you have to remember this position because we're going to take a look at the line. We're actually not having the knight here is a big, or actually not having the rook here is actually a big advantage for white. So rook f8, and now queen g2. Instead there's this brilliant rook c2, which would have really been quite annoying for black to face. The point here, if you continue with the standard plan of playing b4, which is somewhat scary of course because you're opening up here, now comes c takes b4, and if bishop takes, just d5, winning the pawn, and yeah, like, okay, bishop b6 not immediately, but yeah, it's getting very bad. This is just winning for white, just winning the pawn, and because the position collapses. And if c takes d4, e takes d4, bishop takes d4. Now if bishop g3, the line we took a look at earlier, queen g1, bishop f4, now this doesn't make any sense because this knight isn't pinned to this rook is here, so white is doing very well and actually is much better. And if after bishop takes d4 you go, for example, play a nothing move like king c8, there comes knight c4 with a lot of nasty threats. So rook c2 was actually a very good move, just preventing this b4 break by black, and really when this b4 break is prevented, it means there's not much to do as black. So queen g2, and now again b4 could have been tried, but it was not. Instead queen g2, c5 was played, and this just allows d5, closing down the position, and here black is doing very poorly because now white closed down the position. Black needs like 7 years to get anything on the queen side, meanwhile white has a lot of pressure on the king side. And here Gio, for better or worse, should have played c4, just gaining space on the queen side, allowing his pieces to get into the game. Instead he played bishop e7, and yeah, this was just game over. After g5 the knight had to move back, and yeah, white finds very precise moves to just crush the black position. This is one of them, and going for these weakened light squares, knight d6, and yeah, now this is coming, and very tough to defend. Also like h4, h5 at any point. Black really has nothing, so we'll take a look at the rest quite quickly. Yes, Gio did lose actually. Here his opponent could have played queen g4 just to protect here, but instead he played bishop g4, which allows c4, so kind of getting black back into the game, because after b4 now knight f7 was a big blunder actually. a5, quite simply opening up the queen side, and here you have some counterplay as black, and you're not mated on the king side just yet, so black has some chances here. However, he played knight f7, allowing this knight f3 move. And yeah, the knight here is just too passive, even though it looks like it's defending, but actually it's not doing much. So a5, a3, takes, rook a8, all very principled by black for now. But yeah, for example here, white had knight d4. Very crazy move, making use of the pin. And the point here is you're attacking knight b5, and you have some ideas to go knight e6 as well. So instead bishop d2, queen a7, rook fg2, rook a1. So all of these, like, white is just continuing their attack on the king side, while black is trying to trade some pieces on the queen side to alleviate the pressure. And now queen b2 was tried, which just loses tactically. Instead, rook a6 would have been a good trying to go here, and black actually isn't even half losing here. Black can survive this position, probably. Like, white is only better in that position. But after queen b2, there comes bishop g5, and you're losing an exchange. So queen a3, and yeah, here the exchange is just too much. Black probes around, but there's not much happening, and finally rook takes f6 ends the game, because after queen takes, there's queen check, then queen f7, and you pick up the knight, and probably mate as well. So very tough game for Gio. Actually, his opponent just played really well, but Gio had a lot of chances as well in many positions. Yeah, so very tough game actually. It was very back and forth. Both sides with this b4 idea, so that was actually quite interesting to see. Yeah, I mean, just a classic game, but very impressive by Gio that he knows the theory of this Caroline so well. Actually, he positioned his pieces very well, all of that's good stuff, so very impressive actually. But yeah, his opponent just knew some of the lines there better, or some of the positions there better with the plans. Okay, now we're going to take a look at the game between Amro Jawich, and let me remember this time to fix the names. So Amro Jawich playing against Kirill Chukavin, 2400 rated player. So let's see if Amr can restore the balance and get a victory for the Lebanese team. Alright, so e4, c5, and Amr plays knight f3, e6, and now b3. So Amr has been playing this quite a lot recently, and in this tournament quite often as well. b6, his opponent responded, and now d4. We've taken a look at this early d4 by Amr. You can check out earlier videos. I'm not going to reanalyze this. Knight d2, bishop c5, bishop b2. So we've taken a look at a similar position in an earlier round. So do check out that video. And now knight e7, which is a very big positional mistake actually. Here black should try to play queen f6, and then for example you can play knight e7, and I'll explain why in a second. Here you're adding pressure, and yeah, like it's not so clear how white will try to untangle their pieces. You probably have to play c3 or something. Probably knight c4 also works because of knight d6 check at some point. But yeah, it's not looking so great for white. Like, white still has an advantage here, but like, it shouldn't be anything too big. Instead, knight e7 is a big positional mistake because of queen g4, a standard French-like idea as well, attacking this g7 point. And yeah, for example, after knight g6, now comes long castles. h4 was also interesting. But okay, long castles, h5, queen, whoops, long castles, h5, queen e2, going back, king f8. Seems very weird to play something like king f8, but the point is that you don't really want this rook not be defending h5. So if you castle like this, you just lose h5, and you want to get out of any knight takes e6 ideas with bishop takes g7 and stuff like that. So yeah, that was quite important. What else about king f8? Yeah, you also get out of these ideas with checks, so that's also another added benefit. Alright, so king f8, and now f4 was played, a pawn sacrifice, which is quite interesting but really unwarranted. Just g3 and then going f4 was just fine for white, and here white has a big advantage still. f4 loses most of white's advantage because after knight takes f4, queen f3, here comes queen g5, a very good move with the idea to line up against the king and threaten g2 in some positions, and just to overall improve the position of the black queen. So this was also quite good. So this really refutes kind of Amr's sacrifice, but Amr is still better in this position. But now he plays g3, which is maybe slightly inaccurate. Perhaps bishop c4 quite simply was just much better. The point here is in many positions you have bishop takes e6, knight takes e6 ideas, especially with the queen lined up here against the king, and just at some point rook f1, g3, and just really go haywire against the black king. Instead, Amro went for g3, and now knight g6 was played, getting out of this g3 move and preparing some knight e5 ideas. h4 now, a bit weakening. Much better was actually just bishop e2, simply developing. h4, it turns out, allows this queen f6 move, which is desirable for black anyway. And now this g3 point and this g4 point also after knight e5, knight g4, which will become relevant later in the game as we will see. These are all weakened by h4, so not such a great idea. Here Amr went for queen d3. He did have a crazy move, but I'm not expecting any human to find this. Here it's knight takes e6 check. The point is a piece sacrifice basically, so note you're attacking here, so the queen has to take. And now after bishop c4 lining up mate, queen f6 is no longer possible, so queen e7 is basically the only move. And now rook f1, adding further pressure here. Knight c6, trying to control e5, and now queen takes f7 check, bishop takes, and here you recover the piece as white. And yeah, here black is actually down a pawn, but they have a lot of activity, and this bishop is very powerful. These pawns are going to become very weak. This knight has some nice squares, while white's pieces aren't well coordinated and you have really no attack against the black king. So here black should probably be slightly better, but at least white is up a pawn and yeah, can try to defend this. Instead, queen d3 was played, which just allows knight d5 with a tempo. And now after queen e2, knight g4, white would have been in some trouble. Here their knight is attacked, knight f2s are threatened, knight e3s are threatened, and it's not such a great position. Instead, his opponent played the ridiculous bishop takes d4, just giving up the bishop pair and allowing white to have a very strong bishop. Now, I mean, black isn't losing or anything, black is only like maybe slightly worse here, but yeah, bishop takes d4 is a very questionable positional move. Queen e7, sorry, and now knight f3, trying to add pressure to this e5 and the entire long diagonal. And now queen c5 was played, which is again a questionable move because of a tactic we will see, which Amr missed. Instead of queen c5 here, f6 should have been tried, just further defending this this knight. And I know it looks ridiculous to further weaken the king like this, but actually black is quite safe. Instead, after queen c5, Amr played king b1, a natural move, prophylactic move in these positions, queenside Kassis positions. But actually he was just winning after b4 because this just wins a piece. Take a look at some lines. Knight takes, you take here, you're up a piece. And if queen takes, you take here and you're up a piece. And if queen e7, just moving back, you take here and you're up a piece. So b4 would have quite simply won a piece. I don't blame Amr for not finding this. It's a bit counterintuitive, but yeah, he should have been on the lookout for that. But okay, he played king b1, rook c8, bishop h3, king e8, trying maybe to castle if Amr forgets. Rook hf1, adding pressure to f7, and now d6. The wrong move. Usually in these structures, as we have seen, you want to go f6, just further cementing this knight, and really there are no issues here. But there are some positional issues with d6 connected with this, and actually the weakness of d6, the pawn itself, not only the weakness of d7. And this will become relevant later as we will see. Knight g5, knight d8, lending support to these pawns and uncovering this bishop. And now bishop d4. Not a bad move. Bishop d4 is fine, like white is still better, but queen d2 would have just been super powerful. Going for queen f4, queen takes d6, all very good moves and very good threats, so white would have been close to winning in that position. So again, take a look at queen d2. Very difficult to parry all of these threats, and the improved position of the white pieces speaks for itself. So yeah. So instead he played bishop d4, and queen c7 was played, which is a game losing blunder. Black should have tried queen a5, maybe going for some queenside stuff. Sometimes something like this, like just slowly going for the queenside counterplay. Instead, queen c7 blunders due to bishop takes e5, d takes e5, and now Amr counter blunders with knight takes f7, which is only equal. Actually here in this position, so bishop takes e5, d takes, and now boom, well no and now boom, rook takes d8. Amazing move. The point here is if you take here knight takes f7 and you're losing an entire rook and your position collapses because this is falling, so black would be completely lost there. And if rook takes d8 check, rook takes d8, now also knight takes f7, you're winning this rook. So queen takes f7 is probably the best trying to complicate matters, but after takes queen c4 is a very powerful move, aiming to check here and take the bishop. So rook e8 is the only move trying to go for this, but after queen c7 check, rook e7, you take on e5, and white is just doing very well, probably technically winning. Instead, Amr went for knight takes f7, and after knight takes f7, bishop takes e6, knight d6. So here he's winning an exchange, of course, but after, whoops, so bishop takes c8, so knight d6, bishop takes c8. So let's take a look at this again. So knight takes f7, sacrificing a piece, but winning 2 pawns, and now winning the exchange with bishop takes c8. And after black takes with the bishop on c8, and black has the 2 minor pieces against the rook, against the rook at pawn. So that means that the position should be equal, and yeah, actually the position is just equal. White doesn't really have any attack, and they risk being worse if the rook can get out or anything like that. So they should probably just try to start an attack here with rook d5, but after knight f7, just in time to defend here. Queen b5 check, king e7. This position should be just equal. White can just go for perpetual with queen b4 check, and that seems to be the best move, because again white risks becoming worse after, let's say, bishop e6 and rook c8. Instead, his opponent blundered, because after knight takes c8 he allowed queen b5 check, completely winning, because of after bishop c6, after queen b5 check, after bishop c6, which was played in the game, now comes queen c4, and all of this stuff is too much for black to handle. He tried rook f8, but now came rook takes f8 check, king takes f8, rook f1 check, king e8, and queen g7 check, queen g8 check, king d7, and here rook d1 check was another good move, forcing knight d6, and now boom was played, but actually boom boom was even better. Not taking the pawn, counterintuitive, I know, but the reason is that you have these checks that pick up the knight. So if king c8, for example, you go queen e6 check, the queen tries to defend, but you just take the knight, and here you're playing a rook against the bishop endgame, where white is completely winning. So queen f7 check basically forces the loss of this knight. Yeah, so queen takes g7 check instead was tried, which still is quite good for white, but maybe not immediately winning. King c8, queen f8 check, knight e8, rook f1, trying to get the rook back into the game, and now queen g7 just trades off, which might be like seemingly a good idea to have the 2 minor pieces against the rook, but the rook is too powerful, infiltration squares are all there, these pawns will get picked up and these pawns will promote, which is what happened in the game. Instead here maybe bishop b5, avoiding the queen trade and trying to attack the rook here, try to go for some activity maybe, and or queen d6. Actually I forget, queen d6 I don't like, whoops. Yeah, so queen d6, actually I will actually even remove it. So the engine likes this, but in principle I don't like it, because it's just also trading into a knight and bishop scenario against the rook, which should probably just be winning for white. Now I do appreciate that in this position it's better than the other line with queen g7, which we'll take a look at now, But yeah, I don't really trust this. So the only move I would think about here really is bishop b5 or other non-queen tradey moves. So don't trade the queen in this position. Queen g7 takes, knight takes g7, and here you check and just win h5, and the rest is quite easy. This pawn is going to push and be promoted, and you can just take here, and yeah, you have far too many pawns. The king will join to block the e5 pawn, and it's just completely winning. So very nice game by Amr, especially like this sacrifice with knight takes f7 was fun, but it turns out that the very simple rook takes d8 check, which is also a sacrifice, would have been just completely winning. Knight takes f7 was not winning. And earlier on the game was quite nice here. The king here on a weird square, but the white king castled long. So very interesting dynamic game. Okay, so Amr, congrats to him. He beat the 2400 and saved face, made us equal in terms of points. So 1-1 against the Estonian team. And now we'll see what Antoine Kassis did against Andrei Shishkov, sorry. So d4, knight f6, c4, g6. So we get into a same-ish. Here the king's Indian, and now this is the same-ish. A very aggressive setup by white. White just wants to really checkmate black. Try to go for something like this and like throw the h pawn at the g pawn and just crush white. So bishop e3, c5, very principled play. This is the most played and probably theoretically best line against the same-ish. This is called the same-ish gambit. You do gambit this pawn, but you get a lot of activity, especially with knight d7 ideas. So here the best is also not to accept the sacrifice, just play knight ge2, cement the center. And here white, black has the possibility of playing queen a5, just pinning this bishop, and this is this knight, and this is a common idea in these kinds of structures, these fianchetto structures. You'll see it in the Pierts, for example, against the Austrian attack. You guys might be familiar with that line with queen a5. Yeah, okay. And also knight c6 is an interesting alternative. If here just knight e5 and trying to add pressure to the center. Instead, Antoine went for c takes d4, which isn't so accurate, but white isn't like winning or anything. Here you just play this kind of Maroczy bind structure position, so this is a bit reminiscent of a hyper-accelerated dragon. And white does well here to play f4, threatening f5, but a lot of pieces are getting traded, and here this endgame of course favors white, even though this bishop is facing off against this bishop, which theoretically like these pawns are on dark squares, and this bishop here is hemmed in. But the space advantage is quite good, and the bishop actually next move will go to f3, and a lot of nasty stuff is coming. So white is better here, but not even winning, not close. f6, nice idea, also putting one more pawn on the dark square, preventing e5, at least for the moment. And yeah, just a very principled move. But now Antoine, instead of playing rook a b8 and simply defending b7, which looks ugly, I know, but you have to do that, he plays bishop d7, trying to go for bishop c6. But after e5, which is the very principled and powerful play, bishop c6, it turns out that after e takes, this pawn is just going to be very tragically weak, and black will have a tough time to defend it. Here he could have improved on his play a bit, not having found rook a b8, he could have played here f takes e5. The point is that after f takes e5, bishop c6, at least here after takes, you have an open file for your rook. While here, if bishop c6, e takes, now your rook is hemmed in, and it makes less sense for black to play this way. But Antoine did just that, and yeah, here his position is quite bad, but not losing. Like, probably an engine can defend this. So let's see what he did. So all of these are natural moves. Trades off some pieces, gets the king into the game, and this is a bit weakening but kind of forced. Knight c8, f5, and here after knight e7, for example, trying to attack here, trying to get rid of this knight, black isn't necessarily lost. They're just down a pawn and are facing severe pressure. Well, they're not even down a pawn, they're just facing severe pressure, So black probably isn't lost here. But after g takes f5, rook h3, these pawns are just too weak, and this rook is very active, and here Antoine is completely lost. And I'm just going to show you this game, the rest of this game, quite quickly, due to mostly time constraints, and well, yeah, it's not so amazing, I mean, the conversion, but of course the conversion by white was quite good. So just improving the pieces, getting the rook to the back rank, and here black is forced to part ways with the bishop, the exchange. And yeah, I mean, here not much to discuss, just showing this for completeness sake. White is simply up the exchange and does not mess up the conversion. So here, if you want, you can take a look slowly at how the knight was remaneuvered, trying to get it to e6, and the rook was just put here on this back rank so that it further closes the king's escape squares. So all of that was quite good position play. So a very stayed game for the most part, but Antoine just blundered there in the end game. There wasn't much here, and I realized I didn't show you the ratings as usual, and I showed you the result as well. Okay, so for you OCD types, I'm sorry. Yeah, so this is the correct way. Okay, so here we're down to 1. Let's see if Akram can help us draw this match, and hopefully I don't spoil the result. Yeah, I haven't. So he's playing against Kanep Meelis, very strong player, 2400. So let's see how Akram, the very underrated Akram, who's still even if he were at his true strength, of course he's not 2400, so still quite underrated compared to his opponent. I mean, still quite the underdog compared to his opponent. So let's see what happened. Here Akram goes for his standard Catalan stuff, and his opponent plays this early c5, going for a Benoni, which is really clever, to be honest, because now you're playing a Fianchetto Benoni, which isn't so bad for black. I mean, it's not even bad, to be honest. I've never liked the Fianchetto Benoni for white. Bishop f4, knight a6, all principle to play. And here actually we'll see that black really knows their Benoni well. They play all of the standard moves, and they play them very precisely, make it look simple, kind of like Capablanca, you know. When you make chess good simple, it means you're super good, because you're not falling for all the pitfalls that could arise. So knight d2. Yeah, perhaps here just rook e1 was better. Very natural move here, just going for e4. Makes more sense. Knight d2, I mean, I understand you're going for c4, but it turns out that after knight h5, you're forced to go back to e3. And here after knight c7, you're forced to stop b5, so you play a4. And now after b6, a6, b5 might be coming in the future. And I mean, of course black isn't better or anything, but black is starting to get, black gets the initiative, they're starting to get some play. So this probably wasn't the wisest course of action by white, this knight d2 here. Rook e1 is the most played move in this position by far, and that's for a good reason. So b6 here, and now actually white could have tried knight c4. After bishop a6, just queen d3. White is still a bit better here. He tried the interesting queen b3, or actually a bit dubious, because the queen, we'll see eventually, doesn't really belong here. Yeah, I mean, this is very minor, nuanced stuff that of course no human will be able to appreciate. But that's why we're learning, right? So maybe in the future we will be able to. So bishop a6, knight c4, queen d7, and now knight a3. So queen d7 also very nice, just connecting the rooks and controlling some key light squares, and also maybe even attacking here. So black is playing basically perfectly actually. Queen d7, knight a3, and now bishop d4. Now it's not so perfect. Actually here black had a crazy idea, which I'll show you in a second. So bishop d4 here doesn't really make sense, because after takes, knight cb5, black has lost this powerful bishop, and white's bishop is actually doing some nice work. Of course it's not completely happy with it, because of this pawn blocking its path, but of course it's also like while controlling c6 and all of that stuff. So instead of bishop d4, black could have played the brilliant knight f6 with the idea actually of sacrificing on e3, believe it or not. So knight a b5 for example, and now boom, takes, queen e7, and for example if e4, trying to defend against queen e3 check, queen takes e3 check, and the weakness of e3, and protecting this e pawn. Now there comes knight g4, going for knight e3, bishop d4 is on the cards, knight takes b5 is on the cards, bishop c8, going to perhaps g4, perhaps to d7. In some positions, of course, in some positions the knight would be hanging, but in some other positions bishop d7, and f5 by black, all of that. Of course the bishop on c8 would be supporting the f5 break. So all of these ideas are quite good for black, and actually here black even enjoys a slight advantage, actually to a reasonable advantage. So knight f6 was a brilliant move with the idea of taking on e3, but and I have to say though, like the taking on e3, especially in this kind of structure, like I mean it's a common idea in the Fianchetto Benoni, but yeah, I mean this kind of piece arrangement, not structure, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So it's not too crazy to imagine black would find this, but of course it's not an easy idea and not something you can play over the board with full confidence. So bishop d4 again, but that's why we're learning, right? Bishop d4, bishop takes, c takes, knight c b5, takes. So just some liquidation here, taking here the pawn, and now rook a d1. So this position should be slightly better for white after rook a c1, going for bishop f3, just getting rid of this rook, which will become actually relevant in the game, and attacking this knight, and rook c6, just putting the rook on a good square where you can double up after rook f c1. So rook a d1, knight f6, very good move actually, going for knight g4 ideas and attacking here as well. Rook takes d4, recovering the pawn, rook a e8. All of black's pieces are going to start swarming around white's king, and that actually is what happened. So h3, trying to defend against this g4 square, but this actually wasn't really warranted. White had a very nice and deep idea with bishop f3. The point is just to remove one pair of rooks off the board, and black usually obliges because seemingly you're here forced to take, or at least to like go for king takes f1 if rook takes f1 occurs, which isn't so rook takes f1 check occurs, which isn't so desirable. So you take here, takes, and king g2, and this might seem to be quite bad for white, but actually black has no way to crash through. Yes, this rook is annoying on the first rank, but it's only one rook, while in the other example we had two rooks, which is more annoying even. And this is well covered, the bishop covers important light squares and further defense here, so not much is going on. And if h5 for example, just h4, h5 trying to push through, but of course like even the rook can take, but yeah, h5 can always be met with h4 quite safely. So bishop f3 would have been a good move. Instead here Akram played h3, allowing knight e4, so if not knight g4, knight e4, and now these squares are under some heavy fire and the rooks are lined up, and this will actually prove to be Akram's downfall, because after queen d1 he just blunders, because knight takes f2 simply wins the game. Here instead he should have played queen d3 and maintained an eye over these important squares. Instead queen d1 just loses due to knight takes f2. You can't take here because of rook e1 check. So Akram tried queen c1, but now knight takes h3 check, king h2, and knight f2. And the threats are far too big for white to handle. Black is completely winning, white is completely lost. So queen f4 trying to stop maybe knight g4 check, but you know, too little too late. Yeah, white just has no king safety, and yeah, this is really over. So a bit of a tragic loss there. Akram really just blundered. Like he blundered a bit earlier by not realizing the dangers of this knight e4 stuff by playing h3, for example. That was, I think, the beginning of the fall there. But yeah, like overall, just some very minor, like two minor mistakes there, and the game was over. Or well, two minor blunders, but yeah, I mean, Akram played really well, but yeah, actually his opponent played phenomenally. So he definitely deserves to win this game. Very standard maneuvers in the Benoni and all of that good stuff. So actually credit to his opponent. But unfortunately we lost here 3-1. So Amr's win over his opponent who outrated him unfortunately went down the drain in terms of the team standings. But of course for Amr individually that's a great result and a very brilliant game at that. One he could be proud of, he can be proud of. So unfortunately we lost 3-1, but hey, we're going to definitely bounce back in round 7. And yeah, so after round 6 there's a rest day, and round 7 we'll see hopefully the rise of the Phoenix, the Lebanese team. Alright, so with that guys, thank you all for watching and take care.